I'd like to hear each of you talk a bit about the origin story of your film, like back when you started working on it, the kind of, what was the seed idea and how did it come about, sort of, you know, a short capsule of your development process of how it started. Maybe starting with you, Laure.
I was in France at the time where I read an article in a paper, and it was about animal therapy in prison. And I immediately got very, very passionate about this subject because it was blending the poetry of animals in a very aggressive environment. And I explored this subject into a short film, Rabbit, which is a female inmate and a little bunny. And then the bunny became a horse. And, and so it took like 5 years of research, of writing process, and finally shooting the film. It was a wonderful journey, very, very hard. I mean, everyone who's doing a first feature film can witness and can, say the same thing. There's a lot of obstacles, but I feel I grew up with this experience, and also especially coming here, it actually brought me here in America. I live here now. I adopted the horse of the film, so that experience is not only the first movie, but also like impacted my life and my trajectory very deeply. And what else can I say instead of that?
So it was 5 years developing the project before getting to the point that you were shooting?
Yes, I got helped immensely by the Sundance Institute that really held my hand from the first draft until the film was released. And that was, for me, so helpful because I don't come from any film school. I come from acting. So the only thing I knew, actually, and through also the experience of my short films, was talking with actors. But I was still very unconfident about being able to carry a feature film. So being in the lab, having the experience of experienced advisor and being able to have the guidance of people who was really like creating this nest, this very family warm nest where I felt that I had resource and help, that was so helpful. I mean, so there was all the process. I was between the labs in Utah and researching in prison in Nevada and the prison in Northern California. That was my life for several years. Mm-hmm. And beside the lab, yes, going in prison, listening to stories for hours, being able to understand my character, to understand violence and anger, and understand also like the system of prison here in this country specifically. That was so necessary because I needed to immerse myself and understand my subject, to possess, and to make it as authentic as possible. So it was a fight to be able to shoot in Nevada because there was no incentive at the time. Finally, it opened, but I had, by observing and interviewing so many men there, I got really attached to visuals, to the landscapes, to some faces that I really needed to work with. I wanted to work with those men, and luckily we had 3 former inmates in the film, being consultants, being actors, being also writers, and that was, for me, so important to be able to anchor the film in Nevada. That was actually the biggest fight. We had to fight, obviously, the prison system and to beg them and to convince them to finally be able to shoot there. And also, it was not ideal for production. And there were so many equation that was like, no, that's not the right place. You can shoot in New Mexico, or even at some point, we can shoot in Spain. I was like, no, that story belonged to Nevada. It's those landscapes, those lights, those men, those faces, and those stories. So that was like the real struggle.
So Booksmart, had been on the blacklist in 2009. Emily Halpern and Sarah Haskins had written a draft. They had originated the idea. It was about 2 young women who were unapologetically intelligent and in love with each other. And that was a concept that I think excited a lot of people. It didn't make its way into production like so many good ideas. And in 2014, it had made its way to Annapurna, and Susanna Fogel had done a pass, and it kind of evolved further, but still didn't make it into production. It was something that people knew had, it was an idea that wanted to be made, but I honestly think the world had to catch up with the concept. And by the time I heard about it, it had been kind of relegated to the dusty files of unproduced great ideas. And I said, can I pitch on that? I want to take that idea and I want to reinvent it. And I think the world is ready now. And it was 2016, and I saw young people rising up and young women claiming their voice and wanting to smash the patriarchy and change the paradigm. And I was like, they deserve a high school movie that celebrates their intelligence and their love for each other. That's not about boys or assimilation or any of that bullshit. So then I pitched, and I pitched the most insane version of the movie. I said, I want to make Training Day the Training Day of high school movies. And Chelsea Barnard, our producer, our exec at Annapurna, to her credit, was like, all right, okay. And I wanted to instill it with a bunch of kind of heightened reality, magical realism, because that's what adolescence feels like. I wanted, to do adolescence justice, because so many of these movies that are made, they're told with a slightly patronizing kind of tone and eye. There's this sense of like, how sweet that they care so much. Isn't it funny that they care so much? It's like, do you remember being that age? It was life or death. It was like, we can't even remember how intense those emotions were. And I wanted to honor that. And so I just went at it like a bat out of hell and tried really hard to hire everyone I wanted, and I got this incredible cast because Annapurna, to their credit, let me, cast who I wanted, and that was amazing because I think a lot of people would have said this has to be with movie stars. I was unproven, and I had made music videos, and I was in a short film, and I just said, but I really think we need these girls. I had a just gut feeling, as you do, and then we went and found all these amazing kids. Allison Jones, our casting director, who's a genius, she worked 7 days a week to find young people who had a fresh essence. It involved the collaboration of so many people, not the least of which are 2 actresses who memorized 4 pages of dialogue. And when I told them I was going to do it in 1 shot, didn't flinch. I said, you really can't fuck it up. It's our little baby 1917 up there, but I can do it too. It's not that hard. Just kidding, it's so hard. But I just feel like, man, that's an example of like when so many people have to come together and get what it is you're trying to achieve. And they did it on the 2nd take, and I'm very proud of them. Wow. So
Beautiful. Alma, could you tell the story of how, I've heard you tell the story before of how you got to, Shia wrote you a letter, right? Wasn't that the beginning?
Yeah. So I made 2 documentary films before this film. The first one was called Bombay Beach, which was a documentary told through, I guess, dance, but with real people that are not dancers per se. I mean, everybody's a real person, actors too, by the way. But it was what they call real people, which is people that actually have jobs that don't pretend to be other people. So it was. I filmed it in at the Salton Sea, and which is the poorest county in California, and it was like this really independent, if you may, adventure, because I kind of was by myself with a camera, and it was very small, and ended up as a DVD in Amoeba Records, and Shia picked it up randomly because it was like kind of put in the wrong section of Bob Dylan, because it had music by Bob Dylan. So he watched it like twice that night, in the same night, and I suspect it's because it had a child of an alcoholic in it, although he would say that's maybe not the reason. But he emailed me to my website that had music videos on it, and that's how we connected. Yeah.
When you got the email, did you assume it? Did you think it was really from him?
I actually thought it was from him, but my ex-husband, bless his soul, now a very good friend of mine at the time, was like, no way. Like, was like, he would have had his agent reach out to
Yeah.
you. That's impossible. And I was like, I think it's him. And then I wrote him back and I said, how do I know it's you? And he said, my mom's favorite color is purple. And I was like, it's him. And then and then we went and got dinner together, I think like a day later or something, and found out both of our fathers were alcoholics, and we love a certain kind of, I guess, exploration on screen, and just adore Bob Dylan and all sorts of things that, like, when you become friends with somebody, you kind of find all the things you both like and then suffer from. And then he actually financed my second film, which was another documentary called Love True. And then years later, he got arrested and put into a mental health / rehab facility, and was court ordered to go there instead of going to jail. And really, while he was there, he again was ordered to write his memories, and they came out in the form of this amazing script that I again got into my inbox and couldn't say no to.
Wow, that is an incredible story and film.
Well, when it happened to me, my first instinct was actually to make it a film because I'm a filmmaker, and I've always wanted to tell a story about my family, but I needed the vehicle for it. And so when this happened, I knew immediately that I wanted to make it as a film, and started pitching it and started writing it. And the thing that I ran into was most people didn't want to make it. They were like, I don't understand. Is this is this a Chinese film? If it's all the language thing, if it's all going to be in Chinese language and casting, Chinese people as the family and they're all speaking in Chinese, it doesn't make sense as an American film. But when I spoke with a Chinese investor, he said that it was an interesting concept, but it wasn't going to be very dramatic for Chinese people because they all lie to their grandmothers and grandfathers. So where's the drama? I don't get it. And I was like, well, from the American point of view, and he goes, yeah, but Chinese people are not going to get that point of view unless you're trying to do a foreign person in China, in which case you need a white person. And that's the only way to do a fish out of water story. I was like, no, you don't understand. She's looks Chinese, but she's American. And he's like, no, but she's Chinese. And I was like, but, and so it was this kind of cyclical conversation. I go, okay, well, this is clearly not the right person who doesn't see this vision. So I sort of was stuck because I couldn't find American producers, I couldn't find Chinese producers, and then I had a few people say, well, if you made it as a really broad comedy, and where Billy is the bride, then the stakes would be higher because she both has this relationship, but she also is lying to her grandmother, because what are the stakes if she's not the bride and she's just watching? And and then you get in your head because you are like, well, these people have made a lot of films and I haven't, but that's not the story I'm trying to tell. But what if maybe they're right? Like, my story doesn't have stakes, because what are the stakes? Well, her grandma's gonna die, and they're like, yeah, but like, she's gonna die no matter what. So, what are the choices? Like, what does it matter? And so I started trying to write different versions that I thought might get set up, and I just couldn't write that version. And so I was doing that for like 2 years and set it aside and started working on something else. And that's actually because I was on the festival circuit with a short film that I actually made through Film Independence Project Evolve, a wonderful program.
Well, you did.
They gave me the opportunity to make a short film. I had already made a feature, but I thought, I just want to make something at this point, because who knows how long it's going to take for me to do my next feature. And I made that short film. I was on the festival circuit, and Neil Drumming, who's a filmmaker turned producer for This American Life, approached me. So I had this like 2-year-long journey with the script before Neil even approached me, and he said, I'm about to start at This American Life. I'm looking for diverse voices. I loved your short film. It's complicated, and do you mind if I pitch that to This American Life? And also, by the way, do you have any other stories that you want to tell that no one else is letting you tell? Please bring those to me. So I said, funny you should ask. I have this crazy story about my grandmother. It's a true story. And I had written so many different versions. I was like, do I send him a script as a pitch? Do I just send him an email? Do I send him like this? Because I had also written it as a short story that I thought I could maybe publish one day if it never made it into a film. So I sent all of this stuff to him, and he was like, this is the most comprehensive pitch anyone's ever. Usually it's just like a voicemail. They have a number that you call, and you like leave a voicemail, and you're like, this crazy thing happened. Can I get on? But I had like a script and a short story and all this stuff. So it was very quick. They were like, of course, this is great. And that experience did two things for me. Practically speaking, it gave me a platform to tell the story so that producers could hear it and go, this has to be a film. But it also kind of made me go back to why I wanted to tell the story in the first place. And without all of the BS from the industry of what's going to be marketable and what language and all that, because for them it's big because it's a journalism-based radio show. Everything has to be fact-checked, and so everything has to be real. And so the question that's asked is not what's going to be marketable, what's funny, what's broad, but actually what actually happened. And why is this so fascinating? Because everybody felt that they were fascinated, but they were just like, all right, but like, what is it? And so we just dug deeper, and they were like, why don't we talk to your parents? Why don't we talk to your great aunt? Why don't we like just go deep? And it was such a quick process, like maybe like 2 weeks, and then it was up. And there was something so pure about that reminded me of why I became a storyteller in the first place. But having been in the industry for 10 years, and you do the rigmarole of like this pitch, you do so many pitches and stuff, and people tell you enough times that your stories don't fit in, and you're just like, well, I have to compromise. To what degree is the question? And then doing This American Life, it was like so fast, and I'm sitting in the studio at 10 o'clock at night, and it's just me and Neil, everyone left, and I have a glass of whiskey, and he was like... Very key detail in Ira Glass's secret library. It's like a bookshelf that open. I'm not sure if I'm supposed to say that, but it's so cool. It's like so. It was just like this. Of course, Ira Glass has a secret book library. You open the book, and then So I had a glass of whiskey, and then I went in there, and I think we did like 1.5 takes. I maybe redid one thing, and I was like, "That's it." He's like, that's it. It's going to air on Monday. And I was just sort of so joyous, but also so heartbroken, because it was the most pure storytelling experience I've ever had. And I was like, I'm never going to have that again. And I was at dinner with a friend, and I started crying. And he was like, this is amazing. Like, you've told your story, and like millions of people hear this show. They're going to hear it. And I said, but I think I'm in the wrong industry, because I've never experienced that, and I don't think I ever will in Hollywood. So what am I doing? I should go work for public radio. And he was like, that would be great, because then you can move to New York, and we can hang out. So it's like, all right, that's my plan. And then 48 hours later, the show aired, and I started getting all these emails and phone calls from producers, and Chris Weitz called, and then Big Beach called, and so that's how it all came together, like so quickly after the show. And then, because I had done this like big cycle of like compromising, it also gave me the strength when people started calling to be very skeptical and go, what are they going to ask of me? I've already been down that road. And so I wouldn't even take the meeting unless they agreed that it was going to be my vision, that I wasn't going to compromise on the language and all this other stuff, and the casting. And they were like, of course, So that's how it got set up. And then, of course, there's still challenges because you're working with producers who haven't been to China. And so even then when we were telling the script, I had a lot more courage to defend stuff. But there were little things where they were like, there's a lot of eating. There's just like a lot of food. I'm like, that's the reality, though. And they were like, we know that's the reality, but like, we can't possibly put that in a movie because that's just so repetitive. And what are we like seeing? Can't they go for a walk in the park or something? I was like, why would 12 people go for a walk in a park when the grandma's dying and like she's got cancer? Like, I don't know how to do that. It doesn't make any sense. And they were like, and so we just kept going back and forth. I was like, you know what? We need to go to China. You guys have never been to China. We just need to go. So we went, and I took them to my grandmother's house, and we ate. And by like day 3, they were like, oh, yeah, you got to keep the food scene. There's no way they would ever go to a park.
There was an article that the movie's based on. It was written in December 2015. I didn't receive it till the summer of 2016, which was kind of a different time on planet Earth. And started working on the script. It was just a writing assignment, so I had to go in and give my pitch for how I would adapt the article, and had to stop talking about how much I wanted to direct it in order to get the writing job. Which at the time, I think my agent was very confused why I would want to do it, but I felt so compelled to tell this story. And I thought, the only way I'm going to prove myself is to try to prove myself on paper. The director of The Meddler wasn't an exact choice to direct Hustlers. So I worked on the script for maybe 6 months and had a couple drafts done, and then it was a kind of time to figure out who was going to direct it. They kind of sent it to Scorsese, I think, first, which would have been awesome. I'm a big
No.
fan.
I'm going to say no.
Well, as a Jersey Italian kid, I thought it would have been pretty cool, but I was very excited he passed, and I don't even know if he received it, to be honest. But so I raised my hand, and then they said, no, we're going to send it to maybe a couple of you, to be honest. They sent it to a lot of people. A friend of mine sent an angry letter back who received it, which was very sweet. But it took me about 10 months to just get the meeting to put myself up to direct my own script. And then by then I had been editing a lot of footage of strippers and stripteases to show Pan, which was a kind of the music that I had chosen for the film. I'd written a lot of song cues in it, so I was trying to just find a proof of concept, really. And then ultimately, my editor and I put together a sizzle reel that was like a 2-minute little trailer of the movie, a potential trailer.
I saw that. You posted that.
I did post it. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. I mean, I thought, until they make me take it down, there's nudity and probably a ton of Beyonce clips, nothing that I own the rights to. But thankfully, nobody's taken it down yet, so it's still there. So that was my big presentation to the studio at the time. I kind of got the job in the room, which was very exciting. And then came the long process of trying to cast it and trying to get people to green-light it, to be convinced that this was a story worth telling, which, according to kind of everyone in town, it really was not. That studio dropped us. We brought the project around to everybody else in town. The week of the Kavanaugh hearings, which was like not the time to bring hustlers around when husbands and wives weren't speaking to each other. So it was strange. And then really just one studio said yes. Everyone else said no in various ways. Questioned, are the characters good enough moms? Seemed to really have a problem with strippers in the first place. They couldn't say it without giggling. And convincing them that a movie about women drugging men and stealing from them when they identified with those men was really hard. So I danced for the money, as I do, and got one place to say yes, and then did a couple of page one rewrites of that script with all the notes swirling around in my head, trying to convince myself I didn't have to, do everything, didn't have to compromise in every single way. And so, and then I sent them that draft. I thought it was it. I honestly thought it was over when I handed in that script, which would have been January of last year. And they greenlit it 24 hours later, and so it was just off to the races. And, that was it.
Wow. It's so fast. It's so slow, and then
That's always
so
it.
fast,
So
right.
slow, and then so fast. 29-day shoot, 7-week prep, 8-week director's cut. It was awful. It was a terrible. I don't recommend it to anybody. It's not meant to like set a new standard.
Could you talk a little bit more in depth about the reel that you came up with, the kind of proof of concept? Like what went in? What were you going for visually in the way that you were shooting it, and the way that you were approaching the visual look of the film, and the way that you shot strippers? Was that in that proof of concept?
Well, it was hard to find because there's not a lot of footage of strippers that aren't shot a certain way that I wasn't necessarily going to shoot them as. So there were. It was really about taking characters that are often in the background and bringing them to the foreground. But yeah, it was hard. It was, the women of The Wolf of Wall Street, the women of Goodfellas. It was to show that there's a hole in the marketplace and a marketplace. That was really what it was for. So there are tons of movies that I could point to about female friendship and girl groups, whatever they may be, First Wives Club, that. Hot off the presses reference. But yeah, I mean, it was about saying, what's the difference between seeing these women in these films and these friends, bridesmaids, and these girls hanging out in the locker room. So part of it was showing that, women are human, strippers are human, and that there was, a value in that. And then the fun, the excitement, the entertainment of it. But with a wink, So the song that I chose was Beyonce, Who Runs the World, Girls. Because we know we do, we run it. But, to say, a little bit more of just because we're empowered doesn't necessarily mean we're in control. So that was really what I was trying to say.
My next question for everybody would be, I'd love to hear you talk about, all of you, what the set was like, what kind of world you created on set. I mean, these are all such different, distinct films, and with very, as I would imagine, really distinct production challenges, from wild horses to drunken teenagers to strippers
To Shia
to
LaBeouf.
everything, to Shia, to. So, Lorene, what sort of were you consciously trying to create a particular type of set, and if so, what was it, and how did it go?
Yeah, we had a really lovely, balanced group of people, incredible New York crew, professionals. I hired a comfort consultant for any scene in which the women were having physical contact with anyone. She was also our stripper consultant, so I had her with me every time we were in the club or the champagne room private area. She was just invaluable, honestly. Every time the actors or Constance or Jennifer would call out to her and say, is this right? It could be about how to react to someone or how to move your body. And, she was there to remind everybody that the women, that they were in control in this environment, and obviously to keep everybody, men and women, feeling safe and comfortable. But things like, Usher, being asked what his name was, that came from Jack the stripper, who she goes by that online. That's not what I call her. But Jacqueline, I remember Jennifer saying, how would you treat a guy like this if he came in the club? And she said, you'd act like he's nothing. You might ask him his name. And so that happened on take one, and Usher came over and was like, I figured out what we're going to do. And I listened to Usher. So, but yeah, something like that, 300 background actors, 50 strippers, 250 patrons, a real strip club that obviously we had full control over. But again, 29 days, 4 days in a club, Usher, Lizzo, and Cardi all in one day. A lot of our mania was production, just sheer, like, are they going to show up? What time? How do we actually get all of this on screen without slashing it? There were certainly a lot of suggestions, like, you don't need to shoot anything on Wall Street, you don't need any of the guys' stuff, and we could cut all these scenes in the club, and so there were a lot of potential compromises that we didn't really have to do because we just kind of just head down, and we have to get it. Every day someone would say, what are we going to cut? They'd be like, nothing. We just have to finish the day. That's all.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, a lot of challenges that came ahead of it, and a lot of it is just casting and wardrobe, and having that large of a female ensemble. It's a lot of hair, makeup, and wardrobe flying around, and sometimes no wardrobe flying around. So it was a lot to just kind of manage everybody, and try to stay on track. I mean, things like, how do you maintain a color palette when you have all of these variables? And so I did something like, I told our wardrobe and kind of everybody, I didn't want any green in the movie except for money, except when we brought out the green lasers for Usher. And but things like that, to try to maintain as much control when you know how much is out of control. I think it rained every day except 3. So we were just, I don't know, just up against all kinds of things, of course. And paparazzi, and it was shooting at an Old Navy in the Bronx, and people are banging on the glass for Jennifer. So things that, not normal stuff.
And
all
was
the time.
she must have been on set a lot throughout the
Jennifer,
production.
yeah, definitely, yeah. And I mean, I don't know why I wrote a lot of the emotional scenes are out in the street. Almost all of them are in the street, so it was crazy. I think one of the last shots of the movie, I just had to paint out like 10 guys with cameras, and so it's crazy.
Lulu, could you talk about what your set was like, and was this particularly challenging for you? I don't know if you'd filmed in China before.
I had not, no.
So-
Similar problems, though. Nai out in the street, everybody yelling, paparazzi. Very similar.
I believe it.
Although she's the woman, Zhao Shujin, who plays Nai, she is a well-known actress, but it wasn't paparazzi. There was a few people that was like, you're the grandma in the soap opera. But it was very lovely and very contained. Obviously, like, a lot of the issues in the movie explore, like, the cultural differences actually apply to the set, because we had American producers. We have Awkwafina and Tai, both of who don't actually really speak Mandarin. And so we had dialect coaches. And then we had Chinese crew who we had to strategically choose who speaks Chinese and English, and then so that they could be the liaison, so that we weren't like putting a bunch of translators in just to make the sets bigger, and so that we were trying to choose strategically that my DP had either her key grip or gaffer was bilingual. So that, even with all of that stuff in place, there's just a lot of unexpected cultural stuff, language stuff. Like our first AD there, we found out on the first day of shoot that the job is actually different.
The role of the AD.
The role of the AD, because he just kept being like, we're fine. I was like, how am I on time? She's like, whatever you want. Everything's cool. And then I was like, at one point, finally, we'd run out, and then my American producer would be like, what's happening? And so then you realize, but the AD said everything was fine. And so we, like, on the first day of production, had to fly our line producer out last minute, just like, hey, so what are you doing? Want to come to China tomorrow? And then he did, and he had to work with the Chinese first AD, and the Chinese first AD dealt mostly with the crew, and then the American first AD did the American first AD job, which is actually to come up with creative solutions for scheduling, and so there was other cultural stuff where, again, like there, they don't call you by your name when you're the director, you're just director. And at first you're like, this is awesome, I am the emperor of this set. Everyone's gonna do whatever I say. But then you run into these problems where the American producers are like, but we have a budget and we have a schedule, and we only had 24 days to shoot, and we were doing 6-day weeks. Which is pretty standard in China. They actually do 7-day weeks, and I was like, no, we need to rest at least one day. And one was like food poisoning. One was like, we had a location locked, but then some guy who just didn't like the other boss who gave us permission just showed up and like brought the cops with him, just to mess with the other guy because they had a rivalry. And we were like, but we have this contract. And he's like, how do I know this isn't fake? And he like just put it in his pocket. And he had told the cops that we were shooting like Western propaganda stuff. So they wanted to confiscate all of our footage, and they blocked all of the exits. And so we were smuggling like the costumes person and the DIT out with a copy of the footage. And then they still wanted to confiscate the footage. So, and they knew we'd been there all morning. And so they said, we need to look at what you shot. And so we picked the one scene that we shot that morning. We were like, look, it's just the grandma and the granddaughter, and they're just talking. And they were like, we know you've been here for 7 hours. That's all you shot? We were like, welcome to independent filmmaking. They were like, we don't believe you. Where's the rest of the footage? We were like, no, that's it. That's all we did. So, there was just like there's not a lot of guarantees there. You can have a contract and then it doesn't apply. And my American producers had never been to China, so they didn't know how to deal with not having the security of contracts. So it was just a lot of chaos. And then sometimes my DP and I would be like, oh, we want to do that shot, but there's that tree in the shot, so could we change the framing? And let's discuss it. And then we turn around and someone's chopping down the tree. We're like, no, wait. Okay, that happened. So we, you can do the shot now. So we actually had to like readjust and learn that we couldn't say the things that we wanted because they would take us so literally. Like they took down a stop sign and they were like, go, you gotta shoot because we took the stop sign and the cars are gonna start like running the. So and we were like, what? No, and we have a photo. It's like 3 guys on each other's shoulders taking off the stop sign, and they're like, just do it before the cops come. But we like also couldn't block any streets when we were shooting on the streets. There's no such thing as permitting a street. So we're shooting, this uncle like walk and talk, and there's all these people, and so we're trying to shoot, and there's all these we have our extras, but then there's just people, real people, and they keep looking at the camera. So then it's really, yeah. And then we're like, do we put the camera in a box? But I was like, but it's on a steady cam. We can't put everything in a box. And then our first AD's like, I have a solution. All right, I got this. And so he starts yelling while we're shooting. He's like, don't look at the camera in Chinese. Don't look at the camera. Don't look at the camera. And I was like, that is not a solution because there is sound in the scene. And so they're supposed to be talking, and he's like, you can fix that in post though, right? I was just like, no, I'm not gonna redo it. And it was a oneer. It was supposed to be a oneer. So, it was just like a lot of chaos. And then of course, a lot of people know this, but my grandma also would come to the set and it'd be like, please don't tell my grandma. Because she doesn't know, and then there were signs on the...
She doesn't know that she has cancer, or she doesn't know...
Either, at the time, knew nothing. And so then, she'd coming to the set, but there would be all these signs that said Nai Nai, which means grandma in Chinese, because that was the name of the LLC. So I had to confiscate that. And so it was just a lot of chaos. And we shot at my real grandfather's grave. Like a lot of meta stuff. Like my grandma kept insisting, not knowing what the movie's about, that we should shoot in her apartment. And so everyone's like, all right, we'll shoot in her apartment, we'll move her out. And then we decided that's probably a bad idea for a woman who's 85 and has cancer, stage 4 cancer, and something happened. So it involved my family, involved all this crew, and it was just all really messy. And so I guess the atmosphere was just like, welcome to the family. It was like an extension of the family.
Has the film come out in China yet?
It did come out, yeah.
Okay.
And then the virus thing happened, so a lot of people aren't going to the movies.
Wasn't the translation something incredible?
Oh God, yeah. The translation was one of the posters, yeah, with the
Really
big. It was
liked it.
for Chinese New Year, but they translated they came up with a new title for the film. My mom's idea. Everyone loved it. It's called "Don't Tell Her" in Chinese. So then it came out, and my grandma was like, "There's a movie called Don't Tell Her." And, that's me. Anyways, that's a long story. Well, for another time. But there was just a lot of it was very meta and very stressful, both because it's an independent film, you have no time, and we're trying to my DP and I really wanted to make a cinematic film. We spent a lot of time in pre-production, you know, coming up with the visual language of the film, deciding that we were not going to cut to close-ups, and we were going to be very strategic about our use of coverage. And so a lot of stuff was blocking, a lot of stuff was wide, and that's something that a lot of Chinese actors are not used to doing. But it's also something that even American producers are like on a schedule like ours, and you're on your like 14th take, they start to panic because they're like, we have nothing, and you've done 14 and we have 10 more minutes, and if you don't have, then we just don't have the scene. So go into coverage. And we were like, but that would break the cinematic language, because once we committed to this language, if we went into coverage, you could feel it was a different movie. And so that became really challenging because we decided we only had time to either do the cinematic version, the version we designed, or do the safe version. We couldn't do both. And so we just leaned into it. But a lot of times we had to trick everybody. We had to, there was a lot, like our line producer had to help lie and say stuff so that we could get the thing that we wanted. Because we just, just because you would immediately, we both felt it on the set, but that was really, really challenging, because there is a bit of like condescension when you say the word cinema and you say cinematic, because people kind of, and even the crew, you're just like, we're making cinema, and they're just like, okay, but we're overtime. And trying to convince everyone, and so we would just do a lot of stuff to try to make people laugh. Like I would roll around on a little scooter, and we would, you know, just try to feed everyone and give them snacks and tell them jokes, or I don't know, just try to cheer people, especially with 6-day weeks. Like people are really not getting a lot of sleep.
Wow. Alma, how about on Honey Boy, where you have kids and violence, and what was when you started the shoot, did you have any conscious sort of intention about what space you wanted to create, or did you, kind of the actors and the crew just create that with you? How did it come about?
Yeah, I guess from the start, I think this film, because of how it was written inside, like, you know, an institution, a mental health institution, and like being sent from the inside out almost as a help note in a bottle, even though it was an email, it was just like kind of a sense of responsibility towards the process that was maybe beyond what I thought my first film would be like, on one hand, but then on the other felt very much like a continuation of things I've done before. In Love True, which is my second documentary, like there's a lot of psychodrama with them, which is, I guess, a process of recreating memories of people and their traumas, and then having them kind of step into them and play them with other people that played their younger selves. And if you think about it, it's very much what we did, or a version of it. So Shaya, who was so kind to trust me with this script, kind of, we discussed that. We were like, what is that going to look like? I mean, you've just been diagnosed with PTSD. You just got sober, probably for the first time in your life. I mean, in a serious way. And how do we kind of make this set be safe, first of all, for you, but also for this child that is coming into play in this, you know, realm, which is your memories of your trauma. And then how do you cast something like that, which, you know, you kind of can create a really silly sort of house of mirrors, you know, if you bring somebody that, if you cast Otis as somebody that looks like Shaya and he suddenly has to play with Shaya, it could become like something very convoluted, you know? So there was just like all this, I guess, risk that a lot of people were worried about regarding the casting and how that would work, which I actually found really exciting to kind of crack that puzzle and find these two amazing actors like Otis and that played Otis, which are Noah Jupe and Lucas Hedges, and actually take it out of just, you know, bringing Shaya to life, because he's already there, and trying to bring Otis to life with somebody else. And then you know, it was a very, very, I guess, hard shoot because we had only 19 days and we had to shoot a lot of really ambitious stuff that I wanted to kind of have explosions and car accidents and things that really show you the world of film that this guy has been living in, and sort of blurred his, you know, relationship with reality and his relationship with films, and sort of blurred the line between them. So it left us almost only 10 days to shoot all the stuff that was in the hotel, which was like kind of a huge amount of dialogue, consisted sometimes of like pages of pages every day. And to do that with a 12-year-old kid that is limited every hour, he can't give you a full day because he's only allowed to give a few hours a day. So it became this like amazing game of like, you know, how do you basically, as every other independent film, how do you fit all of that and into the time that you have, and then how do you stay responsible for the people involved, because it was very heavy, you know, it was really, really heavy stuff, and like you said, violence and smoking and, you know, kind of things that are very inappropriate to a 12-year-old. And Shia himself having to kind of step into that and do that as an actor and develop tools to deal with that. And I relied on a lot of amazing people. I spoke to his therapist from the institution a lot. His mom was on set all day, every day. Noah's mom, Shia's mom was on set. Noah's mom, who was an amazing partner to me and really helped me monitor his mental health and his safety and his, you know, comfort zone. And Lucas and Noah really kind of understood really early on, the minute they signed on, that this is a really special project, and everybody was like, we're coming in like a month and a half earlier. Even if we don't get paid, we want to rehearse every day and make sure that by the time we get to the set, that even though we have such little time, we know what we're doing. So we rehearsed for almost a month and a half, and Shia and Noah spent every day together, you know, kind of learning how to juggle and going to baseball games. And Noah and his mom were living in Shia's house. Shia was living in a motel because he wanted to kind of get into character. And Lucas was wearing Shia's clothes, and we were just like kind of losing our minds together, but finding a lot of sanity in it too, you know. And it was very hard to shoot because the idea of bringing all these elements from the documentary filmmaking that I was doing, and yet, like I said, capturing some of the cinematic world. And I had an amazing cinematographer named Natasha Breyer who really helped me figure out a way to shoot like that, and found an amazing solution, which was to create basically a Wi-Fi, I guess, system that supported all the lights, and she could in real time kind of DJ it from a bunch of like iPads, so I could have the actors move around in the room freely, and she could change the lighting while they were moving around, and I could operate inside the room with the other operator, Mati, and be really free to let them behave as opposed to hit marks on the floor. So a lot of the stuff like the scene that you saw with the phone was possible because of that, you know, because we could like kind of in real time dim things and change them instead of relighting and things like that. And so yeah, it was a lot of challenges, a lot of pain, some days felt like exorcism, and some days felt like a circus, and some days were really you know, warm and funny and cozy, but mostly it was really, really hard just to manage so much psychic energy, I guess.
Yeah, I can imagine. Before you came onto the film, was there ever a point where Shia considered directing it himself?
No.
That was never a conversation?
No, although I think he should at some point direct a film, and I always urge him to, but no, he doesn't. He did write, I think, 3 more scripts since we finished Honey Boy, and I find each one of them to be brilliant. So I hope he directs one of them, but he's not really interested in that right now. Anyway, I think one day he will be. He's so immersed in the character when he plays a character, and he's. I mean, I know there's a thing. Obviously, we all know the method acting kind of whatever good or bad rap that thing has, but whatever he does is beyond that. Like, I mean, I think it's like a whole other level of just really losing touch with reality to a certain degree, and becoming this character. So he at a certain point was like, I can't touch the script anymore. Like, I have to just be gone now, and do this and be this person, every day, all day. So that was like a big challenge too, to kind of take the liberty to rewrite things that's somebody else's life and have that trust, but know that he never came to set when he wasn't filming, when he wasn't in character. Like, so he never came to anything Lucas shot or anything that was shot without him, and that was also challenging because it was like his life.
Yeah. Wow.
So yeah.
So Olivia, your Booksmart is so enjoyable and fun to watch. Like, I felt like it was my childhood, and I don't know, I just love being with those kids, but I'm wondering if there's an inverse relation between how much fun it is on screen to how tough it was on set. Like, to create that world and maintain order and create the freedom for the actors to play. Like, how was that? What was it like?
It was a lot of fun. I think it needed to be fun to help everybody relax. We had a lot of non-actors or new actors. And I knew from being an actor that there is a magic that can happen when a sense of relaxation is achieved. And that so often nobody thinks about that. I mean, film sets are like construction sites. It's the worst possible place to relax and be vulnerable. And so often the acting is like the lowest thing on the priority list. And as an actor, you feel like everyone's like, great, great, great. We're gonna take all this time to light. We're gonna take all this time to do this. It's great. And then the actors, ugh. And then we go to lunch. And the actors, if they could just hurry it up, we could get it done. And you're like, okay, I'll just bare my soul real quick, really, really quick. I'm so sorry if it's taking too long. And I thought, let me just create the environment I've sometimes had the chance to act in, and certainly the one I've fantasized about being in. And what that really meant for these young people was just making them feel safe and empowered, but really kind of tricking them into forgetting that they were acting. So it was like setting up an entire situation. I played a lot of music on set. I knew that I had to quite literally get everybody on the same rhythm. So there was a sense, I wanted the movie to have swagger. I liked the idea of these, what you would stereotypically categorize as the nerds being so confident that they had a kind of like gangster attitude about their hyper-intelligence and their unpopularity. And I loved that, and I was like, I just never wanted to feel kind of pulled back and, tense and nervous and anxious. It wasn't about that. It was about, like, how do you roll through life not caring what people think, and if you do that for long enough, do you maybe alienate everybody by accident? So that was about setting the tone with a lot of music. And then I just kept relaxing them in any way I could, just making sure no one ever felt rushed. I also made it very clear that the hierarchy of a film set, though sometimes helpful for efficiency, is often unhelpful in terms of respect and relaxation. So the whole idea of like calling actors the talent is such a weird thing. I don't know who started doing that. Like, the talent's coming. Okay, everybody, talent's arriving. And this idea of like the separation between the actors and the crew not knowing if they're allowed to talk to the actors, and there's this like, I don't know if I'm allowed to look at you. And it's so strange. I don't know who started that. It doesn't make any sense. Like, it doesn't happen in theater. It's so intimate. It's like, here we go, you're pulling the lights and I'm acting and we're in this together. And then you get to a movie set and everyone's like, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry. And it just was like, let's make everyone on the same level. Everyone needs to know everybody's name. This is a family. And of course, any independent film set, you have to feel that way because it's run and gun. So it was, I think the thing that comes to mind is just relaxation. I felt like I was there to keep everybody on that rhythm, to make them feel safe, just create an environment conducive to everybody's best work. And it meant, when you're under the gun for time and the props master shows up with the wrong prop, It's not a freak out. It's like, cool, just go get it. We're just going to tell a joke until that happens, because those little moments lead to anxiety, and anxiety leads to inefficiency. And so it was just like, you know, it is therapy, it is motherhood. No wonder women make such good directors, right? Like, makes total sense. But yeah, just keeping everybody chilled out.
Amazing. So Laura, you had what was the condition of the horses on set? Like, how wild were they? What was
So we had
casting the horses?
and that was a process. So we had 3 identical horses for the hero horse. For one that was very well trained, that was the only one that was rideable. One completely wild for the first scenes when he's completely untouched, and one for the stunts. And so, I mean, I see the difference, but they're pretty close together in terms of look. And that's the horse trainer who found them. I knew I wanted to have a buckskin color because it was a very authentic Mustang color. So we chose that color with Matthias, actually, the actor of the film. And he found those 3 horses and trained them in 8 weeks. We had such a limited time to train the horses. And we also had a group of wild horses, but mostly for surrounding, because we couldn't work with them. They were completely wild. And they actually were coming from the active prison. We were shooting in the abandoned prison, just 2 minutes from the active one. So we recreated and we rebuilt the farm with the pens and everything. And we had also all the horses from the horse trainer, like 20 horses. They were the horses we were working with, especially in the storm scene, or the riders were like people who were working with us as riders were riding those horses, and not wild or horses that we didn't know, because he needed to control and to make sure that everyone was disciplined enough and that everything could work. Also, the bad news that we only had 23 days to shoot this film with stunts and horses. And when I knew that, because obviously I was hoping for more and it was not possible, I wanted to make sure that all the horses scene were rehearsed, even though I know that with animals things can change, and actually that did change, but I wanted to make sure that the actors, the DP, all the crew knew exactly what was the plan, what we wanted to do, especially with those moments where we had like 2 hours to shoot. And also Matthias was scared of horses. And Jason and Bruce as well. Jason Mitchell, Bruce Dern.
Bruce Dern was scared of
horses? Oh yeah, it was scared of horses.
I don't know why that's surprising.
They all told me, I love horses. I love them so much. I was like, So Matthias, when we met the first time, was like, yeah, of course I ride. I love horses. Okay. So I was like, okay, I want to make sure that everything's fine. So 2 weeks of intense rehearsing with him and the horse. And actually, the first day, the horse trainer was like, he never wrote of his life. He has no idea what to do. Okay, so keep calm. It's okay. It's going to be fine. No worries. And actually, he did so well, because in 2 weeks, he really became such an expert with his horse. And also, he was not supposed to be such a good rider at the beginning, so he wanted to keep the freshness, but it was for safety reason. He needed to know how to control his horse. So that was kind of like a little bit of a niche, of stress, but it ended up working really well. And also, we only had 1 camera, and the second camera just for 3-4 days. And especially with this very aggressive schedule and the 23 days, after 3 days with 2 cameras, we're like, we are kidnapping that camera. We are not giving it back, because without this one, I'm not making the film. There's no chance. And so was actually a fight that I did with my producer, Molly Hallam, who's in the room. And we were like, we need to get the second camera. It's impossible. So that was actually what helped us in emergency to make sure that the scene were going to be done on time. So that was like then of a...
And we had that.
Yeah. And you had to, and at some point I was like, I'm sorry, but it's a kidnapping. I'm not... No, I mean, given like the circumstances, also like the lights of Nevada are beautiful but change every hour. So obviously we forgot continuity at some point. It was like there's no chance. So let's embrace nature and make sure that we have a good colorist that can fix the mistakes, because it was literally shooting like in the dark, and then, I mean, it was very, very contrasted. But it was part of like also the look at the end of the film, so it was kind of a happy mistake. And we made sure also, even though we had rehearsed those scenes with the horse, to make sure that we add, and I really wanted that, those happy accidents, which just come from improvisation. And especially with a horse, then there's like those moments, and with the two cameras, we wanted to make sure that we had as much as possible reactions, so to build the invisible dialogues between them. So that was like very important, to give that space of improvisation, of like, we have all the elements and it's here and now, and even though you have rehearsed, even though you have anticipation, that's gonna change. And so that was so interesting and so important. So yeah, in this very tight schedule, we found those moments. That was, and it was also come from like the amazing partnership with Matthias Schoenhardt, who was invested long time in advance, made research with me in prison, and felt very connected in a deep personal level. And also the DP was wonderful, like such an athletic dancer who were always like handheld, like trying to catch the unpredictable movement of men and horses, and made such a wonderful job. So it's true that there was a very strong heart to keep going, even though we were like, okay, we're not gonna make it, it's not gonna be, okay, instinct. Just liberate our instinct, not think, not eat, just do it. And that was actually the tension that was in that set, because there's so much tension, so much fear, that I actually end up being the right energy for the film. And that was actually, I was like, okay, that's happened for a reason. Yeah. That film needed to be done with that energy. So at the end, wow. You always find a positive thing. So.
Amazing. I want to hear, I'll just open it up, and whoever wants to talk about this, I'd love to hear anything you want to share about the casting process. I mean, Alma, we heard a little bit on your film, but all of you have such fantastic casts. And how did Matthias come on to the film? You said he came on early. Like, how did that come about? And
yes, actually, he came early. It's a pretty beautiful story, because I met his mother first. By coincidence, in the festival, we have Matthias and I the same agent, French agent. And I met his mother, and his mother was actually doing meditation in prison. She was very involved in this program of meditation. So I was actually at that time working on my short film. So I was explaining what I wanted to do as a feature film. She talked to Matthias. Matthias talked to my agent, and my agent told me, oh, Matthias knows about what you're doing. And sadly, his mother passed away several months after. And he actually, we kind of had, since that moment, I knew that it was potentially interested by the stories. And when we sat down, it was that not only I want to do this character, but also I feel that it's the goodbye gift of my mother that kind of connected us into this adventure of like, and that was very cosmic. It was like, okay, it's meant to be. And from that moment to the end, I could count on him, his support and his passion. And yes, that was absolutely magical, the way it happened.
Olivia, could you talk about, so I feel like you obviously cast the whole film and the world of the friends, of the kids, but you also cast that friendship between Beanie. And can you talk about both pieces there?
Yeah, I mean, the entire movie rested upon them having great chemistry. And I realized after I'd cast them both that I maybe should have introduced them before casting them both. Because suddenly I was like, what if they just hate each other? Just on like a cellular level, like they can't deny it. I just didn't know. And so I organized a lunch, and they were fans of one another. I knew that. It's a good start. And then Beanie walked in. I was sitting with Caitlin. Beanie walked in, and they hugged for what felt like 5 whole minutes, just taking like deep breaths together. And I was like, wow. And then they sat down, and they held hands the entire lunch. And I was like furiously texting the producers under the table, like, they're holding hands. And then I said to them as a joke, you guys should get an apartment together and live together for the duration of the shoot. And they were like, can we? And I was like, yes, you must. We have to make it happen. So then texting, like, you have to get them an apartment, you have to rent them an apartment. And they lived together for a month before the shoot and then throughout. And I think that was the whole film. That was it. Because at a certain point I realized it's only about the relationship. I can lose every location, everything can fall apart. I can shoot it in one room if we just have that relationship intact. And they worked so hard to achieve that nuance of an old friendship. Yeah, I'm very grateful that they were all in. It wouldn't have worked without that.
Well, I had a similar dilemma where we had cast Awkwafina. I knew that I wanted that she had to be cast first because of the language situation. She had to speak enough Chinese to have a relationship with her grandmother, but feel quintessentially American. And so we found Awkwafina and then had to build the cast around her, but we moved to China to start pre-production without the rest of the cast. We had cast Tai Ma as the father, but we started casting for the grandmother and the great aunt. Those were the two sisters. And we had a Chinese casting director, and I had been seeing all these tapes and hadn't found anyone. And then, not to mention all the uncles and aunts, and then the bride and groom. There was just so many roles. But we had this very short window for production that we were backing into because Awkwafina came like 3 days before we started shooting. She's so busy. So I knew whoever I cast as the grandmother, we also were going to have no time to test the chemistry. And the grandmother was going to be cast in China, which meant she spoke no English, and Awkwafina doesn't speak any Chinese. So they would meet the night before we started shooting and not speak the same language and had to have chemistry. And so the other thing I wanted to consider, even though the film was very stylized, we knew we were going to really block it, and it was all going to be done in these like static wide shots. But I wanted the performances to feel organic and to be the charm and all of the humor, while the camera kind of did the opposite thing. You know, set the stage for something that felt more theatrical and performative, that represented the lie of their joy and charm. And so I had to decide who was going to be an actor, who's going to be a non-actor, you know, what was the right balance of that. And then I always wanted my great aunt to play either herself or her sister. So we started there by I auditioned her during our location scout a few months before, and she was terrible. Every time she tried to be her sister, she would go, ha, and then she'd just start laughing and be like, did I do that right? Oh my God. We're like, this is never gonna work. So we put her out of my mind for a little while, but the thing is that in China, these Chinese actors work all the time, and they get paid a lot of money when they're good. And they're all really, really, really good. But for us, we have a very low independent American budget, and so we just didn't expect that they would be so expensive. And so we just couldn't find anyone, and we got so desperate because we were like 2 weeks out from the first day of production. So I sent the casting assistants. There were these like young casting assistants. I sent them to the park every morning around the city to look for older ladies. And also Mr. Lee, like we had all these roles. I was like, just go to the park and find somebody cute. And so they were like chasing people down, being like, do you want to be in a movie? And it did not work. And so for like a week, we saw all these non-actors. And at this point, the financiers are just like, just pick one. Like literally, Awkwafina's flying, and we can't not shoot. You can't not have an actor. And I was like, this isn't right. These people aren't right. And I don't know how to explain it, but they're just not right. And I was like, and they were like, what are you looking for? I was like, I will know when she comes along. They were like, that is not good when we start production in 2 weeks. So then I did another audition with my great aunt. I suddenly said, you know, at this point of desperation where we're grabbing ladies off the street, let me give my great aunt a chance again, but this time I'm going to audition her to play herself. And so then I did this longer audition where I just said, forget the camera, talk to me about what it was like to be in that moment lying to your sister. And so we spent a really long time getting her to forget the camera, and then we got this really emotional, not even a performance, she just broke open. And I was like, that, where she wasn't putting on a smile, because that's actually who she is. She's always like wanting to make people laugh. She doesn't want to be vulnerable. So I got her to do that, and then the producers were like, that's amazing, but one, can she do that when she's nervous on set? And two, is this going to be traumatic? Kind of like what you're dealing with, like somebody revisiting trauma, and is that ethical for us as filmmakers to do that? So I said, well, she's an adult, let's talk to her. And we walked her through, and we were like, also, because she'd never been on a film set, you're not just doing it once, you're doing it multiple times. And she said, okay, I understand, and I'm willing to do it. And so then we cast her as a sister. We found Zhao Shujin. Her audition had, we had sent her, I knew I wanted her, but we had sent her the script. She never responded. And then by chance, Dinah Lin, who plays the mother, said, have you considered this woman, Zhao Shujin? I was like, yeah, I sent her the script, weeks ago, and she never got back to us. And she's like, well, I'm friends with her. Why don't I connect you guys on WeChat, and you can ask her directly? So that was like the moment where I was like, oh my God, she's the one I wanted the most. And I called her, and she said, oh, I heard about that script. I didn't really read it, though. You guys have no money. But then I said, it's actually based on my real grandmother who's still alive, and this means so much to me, and you're the only one who can play her, and please, please, please. And I cried on the phone, and then after I told her the story, and then she started crying on the phone, just like, how can I say no? So she agreed, by the end of the phone call, we were out at dinner, I came back to the table, and they were like, I was like, yes, she's doing it. But, she flew in, and the first day of set was the most important scene, testing their chemistry, which was where they're doing the exercise, and it's a oneer. So, it's the first shot of the first day, and it's basically the first time they're really spending any time together. And I was like, this is either gonna work brilliantly or it's not, and the whole rest of the shoot is worthless, because everything relies on this chemistry. And so it took a few takes to warm up, but thank God it worked. And we just all felt it, and everyone let out a sigh of relief. And then I had shown everybody videos of my real family before, so that was part of just creating this like real family atmosphere, which I really admire Mike Lee, and wanted to have time before where everybody spent time together as a real family and lived together and got to know each other, but we just did not have that. And we had started shooting, and some of the cast still hadn't even come. And so the first time like the uncle came was when like the first thing where we actually needed him at the table, and they were like, this guy, he's here now, So we just didn't have any of those resources, and how do you build a natural chemistry? And so I showed them a lot of videos of my real family. Having my great aunt there was so essential, because she grounded everything. Everybody knew that this was her real experience, and whenever anything felt a little too broad or like unbelievable, they would say, well, what did you do, and what did it feel like? And so it made it so organic that in a way people, I think, supplanted their own family. Like they were like, that is my grandma, that is my granddaughter, and how would I treat them? And we were also just incredibly lucky, because even with the aunt, we had cast Gugu, we had cast an actress, and she dropped out last minute, and I was so fed up. I still had 3 other people to cast, and she was a small role. That was like, what do we do? And my Chinese producer Jane said, well, I have this woman. I said, is she beautiful? Because that's all my aunt cares about. She's like, if you're gonna cast me, she better be beautiful. I was like, of course, you're beautiful. Gotta have a beautiful actress. So Jane said, I have this friend. She's a great actress. I was like, great, is she beautiful? She's like, here's her picture. I was like, great, cast her. And then she showed up, and I had forgotten that the other actress dropped out, and this actress came, and I was like, what? But then she turned out to be great, and so I feel like some of this stuff really is just also luck. As much as you try to plan and as much as you try to have intuition, there is a lot of luck involved. But I still think that following the intuition, and trying to create this really intimate sense of family helped.
Did you have time with Awkwafina before going to China? Like, were you spending time with her in New York, or had you gotten to know her off set?
Nope. I had met her, and then for a coffee when she said I really want to do this role, and then she sent in a self-taped audition, and then I said, you have the role, and she's, because she's so busy, she was working all the time, that we spent no time together, and I just kept saying, how's your Chinese? And she told me during the audition she spoke great Chinese and all this stuff.
And she can ride a horse.
Exactly, it was exactly like that. And then she showed up on set, and then everybody was speaking Chinese, and you could, like, during, like, the night before, we were just, like, doing some camera blocking, and she just sat there, and we would all be talking, she'd be like, huh? What's going on? I was like, so thank God what we had done is I recorded the entire movie where she spoke Chinese. I recorded it and sent her as an MP3. And so I said, just please, like, listen to this over and over. And so she actually did. And so that really helped with the language part of it.
I want to thank all 5 of you for coming out, being here tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I want to urge, I'm sure everyone here already will do this, but make sure this weekend, watch the Spirit Awards on IFC on Saturday, and it's streaming on Twitter, so 2 p.m. on Saturday.